Okay, well, let's get started. I'm going to do this one a little differently than I've done some of the mini sides of Decatur. We're delighted to have y'all with us. This is the first one of this year's series. Last year, what did we have, Suzanne? 6, I think? Maybe? 6, yes. And this year we've got 8. And we're branching out into some little different types of history than maybe what we've done in the past. The history of First Baptist Church and the look at their chapel, that's a chance to actually look at some historic architecture and how it has been restored. By the way, the last thing they're doing, I was in there yesterday, there's a fellow that is hand painting around the Gothic arched doors. It's hand painting about that wide, and it is just, man, it's just right there, gorgeous. It is really nice in there. So we're adding that. Miss Kate Latner, that's a little different. You know about Miss Kate, she owned the local sporting house. And that's all we're going to say about that for the camera today. We'll let Mr. John Allison, the county archivist, tiptoe through the tulips on that one. We've got something kind of new, African-American movers and shakers in the city. And Peggy Towns will be doing that. Peggy's a well-known African-American historian here, has written several books on the subject, and I think that's going to be quite interesting to learn about some of the folks from Decatur's past who are African-American that maybe have not gotten their due and should be brought to the forefront of our knowledge. Then the last one is really different. We're going to do antiques and treasures. Andy Dye, who owns a couple of antique stores on Bank Street, is going to do that, and is going to talk about, that's a different kind of history. Personally, that's one of my favorite types of history. I've been an antiquer for 60 years, and I just love antique stores. To me are museums, free museums where I can learn about stuff, and actually if something just, oh my gosh, I can't do without this, I can actually walk off with it after I pay a little money. But y'all still do a little antique, and yeah, good. So I think that's going to be quite interesting. Andy loves to specialize in local things. He finds a lot of, he'll call me every now and then and say, come down here, I got something for you to look at. And I go down there, oh my gosh, you're kidding, you got that. I mean, just, one thing he had was an old State Bank saloon whiskey jug. This was a bar at one point in time. That is a rare deal to see that. And it was priced accordingly and should have been. It was more than I had in my pocket. So this is the first time, I think, Lamar, am I right? Lamar Ray's here from our IT department, and I think this is the first one of these that we have filmed, maybe? Have we done one in the past? Caroline?
We got Dr. Slope.
Yeah, we did do Caroline last year, didn't we? Right at the end. We're going to try to do this, we hope, so we can put them on city websites and whatever. By the way, if you're watching this by virtue of a film, my name is David Breland. I am the manager of historic resources for the city of Decatur, and also with me is Suzanne Langdon, who is our events coordinator, and my colleague here at the Old State Bank and also at the Union Depot. We are very informal with this. We have a group here at the Old State Bank this morning, and we like to talk back and forth. One of the best things about my job is that I get to learn. I probably learn more things than I teach to people. People come in all the time with new things, and frankly, I think my job is to know who the best historians in various fields are. I think that's one of my primary duties. I do specialize in a couple of things, but Dr. Caroline Swope, if it's architecture, that's who you go to. Phil Wiry, cemeteries, early Decatur history, and Native American history here. So what we're going to talk about today are the many sides of Decatur. And you're going to walk away from here, you're going to say, well, he didn't say much about that. And that is very true, because what I'm going to do is talk about around 20 different types of history we have and give you a blurb or two about these. You know, maybe just spur a little bit of interest, but also so that I can hopefully impress on you the magnificent history. Come on in, Steve. Steve Bonner, that does a lot of the city's social media, has just walked in, and he'll probably be putting some of these films online for us. Steve loves history as well. Mary Morgan is here. Mary has just done a really wonderful book on the history of her great-grandfather, who was a big-time builder here in the city, built a lot of the iconic buildings here in the city. And that's, by the way, Suzanne, there's you another good candidate for someone to do a talk. I think that's pretty interesting when someone will talk about their family and what they've done. I don't know how many buildings grandfather built, but or great-grandfather built, but just amazing architecture here. So what we're going to talk about is just kind of in general terms, some of the types of history we have. You're probably also going to walk away and say, well, he didn't even talk about this. Well, that's good. I'm glad when you recognize that, because we have more than 20 different big categories of history. When people come here, we have a lot of people that come here for our history. A lot of the riverboats that come here, people are coming here for our history specifically. They have researched us, and so they'll come in to the depot and the old state bank loaded for bear. You know, I hear that you had some of this kind of history. Tell me more about that, and it gives us a chance to do that. I actually put that online when we have riverboats coming for that purpose, and we actually have people that say, why would anyone come to be a tourist? and I say, you gotta be kidding. Oh my gosh. You know, that's sad that you don't know any more about us than that. We had 14 boats come here this year. We have already had a soft announcement. This is not written in concrete yet, but they anticipate one cruise line bringing 24 boats here next year. That's an increase of 10 because of the number of people that want to come here. Do a Tennessee River cruise. We actually have another riverboat line that's been here in the past that I think is a good candidate for coming back here, another big cruise line. So we could easily have more than 30 riverboats of people coming in here to learn about our history. Because a lot of people stay in the downtown area on what we call the historic loop, and they basically go to our museums. There are 5 museums on that loop, restaurants, a lot of which are in historic buildings, and so on and so forth. So just keep your eyes and ears open. By the way, history of Decatur, Alabama. Do go on Facebook and see our posts that we put on. I put on usually 4 mini posts every morning and 4 in the evening. And on Fridays we put up on some extra, because I usually don't put on stuff on Saturdays and Sundays. But we also put on things that I know would be of interest to you about historic events. Things that have to do with history, event-wise in the city. So that's just a good way to kind of keep up with what's going on. Recently had someone that we had an event that we had posted on, I think 22 times, and said, I wish that you would put things on before you had the event. And I said, well, this was on 22 times. Well, I didn't see it, but there it is. You know, it's out there. Okay, so let's talk for just a few minutes about just a kind of capsule look of the types of history that we have. And by the way, I apologize to you. I've had an eye infection for a year. Hopefully we're getting to the end of this. I've already had 2 surgeries and due for a 3rd, and maybe a 4th here in the next couple of months. So my left eye I can see light, I can see a hand moving, and that's about it. So I'm just going to hold this up, makes it a little easier for me to see it. Let's talk about the Tennessee River for a minute. We take our river for granted here. We really do. That river is magnificent. It is a beautiful river, and we are at probably one of the widest spots, if not the widest spots, with the river and the lakes that we have here, Swan Lake and Wheeler Lake, of course. But Native Americans relied on our river hundreds of years ago for transportation, for food, fishing, that type of thing. Spirituality, and by that, the Cherokee probably are the ones that originally called it the Singing River. You may have heard of the Singing River Trail, which is going to be a wonderful bike trail throughout all of North Alabama. It's going to be close to a 200-mile bike trail. Parts of it are already open. Singing River actually came from the Cherokee, some of whom, before the rivers were dammed, believed that they could hear the river singing to them. So it has a great deal to do with the spirituality of the Cherokee people. We'll talk about in a few minutes the Trail of Tears and Native American folks, but suffice it to say, it had a lot to do with Native American people hundreds of years ago, has everything to do with who we are today. If you want to ask me the one defining feature of this city, what is the one thing you think of when you think of Decatur? That's the first thing I think of myself. I grew up here. Without the river, wouldn't be the Decatur we know today. Just that simple. Paleo Indians. I'm just going to touch on this because Phil is going to give you a big history of this, but we had something called a quad here, which is a pretty large settlement in both, had aspects of it, both in Morgan and Limestone counties, and some of the islands that were in the river that are now inundated by the waters that were created by the dams. This was I believe, Phil, I'm right, the first Paleo Indian site rediscovered in the southeastern U.S. And research on that was led by Dr. Frank Sode, who was one of the lead chemists at Chemstrand when they first came here. This site is believed to be, everything I've read, Phil, is at least 10,000 years old, and you may believe it's even older than that. How old do you think the Paleo Indian site is?
You can go back 20,000 years, maybe.
Wow. So if you want to know, people ask when was this place settled? And you know what that means. When did white and African American people first come here? 18, 14, 15, 16, along in there. But it was settled by Native American people before that, and Paleo Indians long before that. Native Americans, 3 tribes lived here. We always think of the Cherokee, but actually Decatur was about on the dividing line of the Cherokee and the Chickasaw. There were probably as many Chickasaw folks in this area as there were Cherokee, and we actually had some Creek folks here as well. Their northernmost outpost was roughly where the quad was located, out toward Fort Mallard Park. In 1837 and 1838, all of those tribal people were forced to leave their homeland. Now, some were able to hide and hang back, but there was an attempt to remove all of the native people east of Mississippi, remove them to the west in something called the Trail of Tears. Now, we think of the Cherokee Trail of Tears, but also there was Chickasaw, Creek, Choctaw. Some went, I'm not going to say willingly, but they went voluntarily, quote unquote. When they saw the handwriting on the wall, they said, well, it'd probably be better to go ahead and remove ourselves than be removed at the sharp end of a bayonet. So 1837, 1838, we actually had in 3 organized detachments, about 2,300 Cherokee people come through here. They came from Chattanooga. They were gathered together in Chattanooga, came by boat, flat bottom boats. Had to get off in Decatur because of the Muscle Shoals. Shoals is whitewater and a river. Between here and Tuscumbia was virtually impassable, even on a flat bottom boat back then. So that's the reason the Tuscumbia, Cortland, and Decatur Railroad, which we'll talk about in just a second, was built in the early 1830s, was to get around the shoals. In other words, you offload here in Decatur, travel by train about 45 miles to Tuscumbia, get back on the river, which was deep water there, and then you can go on out to the Ohio, Mississippi River to the Gulf, or you can go up rivers like the Arkansas River. So Trail of Tears, we had about 2,300 Cherokee people come through here. There's actually a National Park Service trailhead at Rhodes Ferry Park, and there's a state marker out there. Now, a good bit of the information in both that trailhead and the state marker, especially the state marker. The state marker was personally written by the Chief Justice of the Cherokee Nation. He's a friend of mine now, and he was also the Chief Historian of the nation. Anything like that has to be proofed and approved by historians on a higher level. He also hand wrote one of the major sign of the 4 signs in the National Park Service marker out there. When they asked me who were the authors of this, so we can proof the work, I said it was the Chief Justice of the Cherokee Nation, who is also the Chief Historian, and I would suggest that you contact the Chief of the Nation if you think anything is incorrect on this. It said passed. So at any rate, a lot of Cherokee folks here, military heroes. I'm just going to real quickly go over this. We're named for a military hero. We don't believe that Stephen Decatur ever came through here. He was a guy from Maryland, but he was the military hero of his day. He defeated pirates in North Africa. That doesn't sound like much, but boy, they were the scourge of naval transport back in their day. So this enabled cargo ships to much more freely operate in the areas of the Mediterranean Sea and other places, which helped to make this a great nation. So Stephen Decatur was a military hero. He was killed in a duel with another Commodore in 1820. I won't spend time on this. I've taught whole seminars on it, but it's a really interesting story about Decatur and that duel. President James Monroe, who was perhaps Decatur's best friend, he was his next door neighbor. Decatur was so famous, he was allowed to buy the lot next to the White House. And boy, you got to be pretty high cotton to rate that lot. So Monroe entered an executive order that every state should have a Decatur, either a county and or a town. So Rhodes Ferry, which was the original name of Decatur, overnight became Decatur. All the Decaturs in America had that same common history. They were generally something else and were named for Stephen Decatur. There are about 25 or 26 Decaturs throughout the nation. So we were named for a military hero. Confederate Lieutenant General James Longstreet. Phil is an expert as well on Longstreet. He lived in Somerville, nearby Somerville, for part of his growing up years. He was a hero in the Confederate Army, a very well-known hero in the Confederate Army. Joe Wheeler, who was actually a native of Connecticut and moved to this area after the war was believed to be the youngest full general in the Confederate Army. He talked his way back into the U.S. Army in the late 1890s. Now think about that. That is 30 years after he served in the Confederate Army. But he was so young, he was in his early 20s when he was a pretty dashing Confederate commander. So would have been in his 50s, early 60s. Got back into the U.S. Army. He was Teddy Roosevelt's immediate superior officer in the charge up to San Juan Hill in the Spanish-American War. So, being from this area, he was a military hero as well. Folks don't know Admiral Don Whitmire quite as well. Admiral Whitmire was perhaps the greatest football player ever to play at Decatur High School. He is believed to be the first man to be a football All-American at 2 separate universities, University of Alabama, and then when World War II broke out, he enrolled in the Naval Academy, where he was a star football player and later became a full admiral. He was famous for, he was basically in charge of the evacuation of South Vietnam at the end of that conflict, and is credited for saving thousands and thousands and thousands of lives. He was responsible, if you remember this, remember seeing him pushing planes and helicopters off of aircraft carriers. That was a gutsy thing to do because that was expensive material, but it got a lot more people. Gave them space to get out. This is a man that nobody knows about, and what a shame. I'm going to tell you about him because you need to know about him. A fellow named Joe Hooper. Has anyone ever heard of Joe Hooper? Oh my goodness, well great, glad to hear that. Joe Hooper's wife was Faye Hooper. I knew Faye pretty well. Joe had already passed away when I got to know Faye. Joe Hooper, who lived here, was a Congressional Medal of Honor recipient for bravery in the Vietnam conflict. So that is an elite group. Even if you're a private, if you're wearing that medal, I don't care what your rank is, you salute not the person but the medal. You can be a 5-star and you're saluting a medal on a private. What made him, now that's pretty incredible in and of itself, but what makes him even more special, he was nominated for a second Congressional Medal of Honor. The Army, I am told, blocked that because he really wasn't supposed to be back in the conflict. He supposedly talked his way back into the Army. In general terms, if you are a recipient of a Congressional Medal of Honor, you're removed from combat, because if you think about it, if you're captured by an enemy, what kind of propaganda coup would that be? But he was able to talk his way back into, he wanted to serve again. He got back into the Vietnam conflict again. What he was nominated for the second one was even more heroic than he did in the first one. He did win receive 2 silver stars for his work in that conflict, but was nominated for a second Congressional Medal of Honor. I'm not sure about this, but I think the only persons that have been nominated for more than one were perhaps in the Civil War. If there's anyone else, I'm not familiar with it. So that is a rare, rare, rare thing. And he lived here in Decatur. Banking history. We're sitting in the oldest bank building in Alabama. This was established in 1833 when Andrew Jackson was president. Andrew Jackson hated the bank in the United States. He hated the national banking system, got rid of it, started the state banking system. And this was one of the 4 banks in that banking system. The main branch was in Tuscaloosa, which as far as I'm concerned is still the center of the universe for a slightly different reason. I've heard those boos. But this was basically the North Alabama branch of the Bank of Alabama. Railroads, I have done entire seminars on that. I'm going to be very brief on this because at some point in time we'll want to talk about this a little more. Some other year maybe we'll do this. Tuscumbia, Cortland, and Decatur Railroad was the first railroad in this nation west of the Allegheny Mountains. So the first railroad west of Pittsburgh, the first railroad in the American West. By the way, we considered ourselves Westerners in the 1830s, not Southerners. We had more in common with people from Illinois and Ohio because they were Westerners than we did people in Georgia. Those people in Georgia, they took baths. They lived in fancy houses. Now those good people from Ohio and Illinois, they wore buckskin. They smelled like we did. So back then, we were part of the West. So we had the first railroad in the American West here. That railroad was built, once again, to bypass Whitewater and the Tennessee River. It opened up this area because it enabled the cotton plantations to get their cotton to market much more readily. That railroad was absorbed by the Tennessee Valley Railroad, then the Memphis and Charleston Railroad, which became the first railroad to go from the Atlantic Ocean to the Mississippi River. So it cut the South literally in two from east to west. That is very important to understand just a little bit later on. Railroads built this town because a little later we got what became the L&N Railroad. The Memphis and Charleston became the Southern Railroad. So we had the L&N and the Southern. L&N was a north-south railroad. It went all the way across the South, north and south. And the Southern went all the way across the South from east to west. Are you kind of getting the picture here? We had a big old target on us right here because if you wanted to go north and south or east and west, you pretty much came through Decatur. That was just the way it was. That made a lot of difference in the Civil War, and we'll talk about that in just a second. Railroads built the town, got the town totally destroyed during the Civil War, and totally rebuilt the town after the war, when up to, this is incredible, up to 80% of our total workforce worked for railroads at one point in time. When we had about 10,000 people in Decatur and New Decatur, about 5,000 of those would be in the workforce. Females were not in the organized workforce for the most part, so you're talking about, your male population, about 5,000. 4,000 of those work for railroads. Now, they made this town rich because railroad jobs were good paying jobs. They are still good paying jobs. They're among the highest paying blue collar jobs of any of them. Railroads still are building this town. Anyone a plant manager or married to a plant manager, or you've got a plant manager? Yeah, there we go. I'm told by our plant managers here, we could do without the river now. 50 or 60 years ago, you had to have the river for various things. Now it's the railroads. One plant manager said, David, I'll tell you how crucial they are. When they're out of bid, when they're down for 5 minutes, we're down. We can't do anything. They got to get their goods in here to work on via railroads, and the stuff that goes out of here goes out via railroads. Civil War, we were a target. After the Battle of Shiloh, which occurred in 1862, the South had a very tough decision. They did not have enough men to guard and defend both Corinth, Mississippi, which was a major rail junction and the gateway to the Mississippi River, and Decatur, which was a major rail junction and the gateway to the Tennessee River. So they made a tough decision and said, well, we'll guard Corinth. So in essence, left Decatur as an open city. Union forces and Confederate forces fought over this town. Most historians believe we actually changed hands either 8 or 9 times, just depending on whose history you want to believe. Just to sum it all up, because of the railroads and the river, this town was virtually totally destroyed by the end of the war. A town that had right at 1,000 people at the outbreak of war. And a town that was 40 years old already by the outbreak of war, was reduced down to 4 buildings. This is one of them. The Dancy Poke House is another. The Burleson House on the river is another. And the McCartney Hotel, which was, it's now raised, but right over here, about a half a block, was the 4th. This was a supply depot and field hospital. Dancy Poke was the commanding colonel or general's house for the Union Army. Burleson House was a headquarters for both armies during the war. McCartney Hotel housed general officers. So those 4 things had a military importance. The rest of the town was virtually totally destroyed during the Civil War. Now that led to rebuilding and architecture. And if you think I'm going to talk a lot about that with a doctorate level architecture specialist sitting in the back, you are crazy. Where are you? There she is, right in the very back there. Don't miss Caroline's talk on architecture. She is fantastic. She's a great storyteller and certainly very well versed. But we are still talking about Victorian architecture, which fits very nicely in what I'm going to do here. Since the entire town virtually was destroyed, it had to be rebuilt. Southerners primarily rebuilt in this area that we call Old Decatur, just right here next to us. Bank Street was the main shopping district for Old Decatur. And the 2nd Avenue area was primarily the shopping district for New Decatur, which was Northerners that came here primarily in the 1880s. They built a new town that they called New Decatur, which later became Albany in 1916, and the 2 towns were merged by the state legislature in 1927. Come on in. So, good morning, how y'all doing? Good to have y'all. Having a little bit of a history talk this morning. Just have a seat anywhere. The city boasts a large number of Victorian houses, and there are different types of Victorian houses. Not going to get into that because Caroline is going to give you a wonderful overview of that and an in-depth overview. Let's see, you're going to be November 3rd, I think, Caroline. But we have a large collection of Victorian homes here, large collection of craftsman homes, which were basically an everyman's house. They were working men's houses, simpler in design. We've got a large collection of those as well. And then some streets, I think perhaps my favorite street in all of our historic districts, and we have about 100 square blocks of houses that virtually every house, if not every house, are on the National Register of Historic Places. We take it for granted, but my gosh, for a city this size, we have a huge number, a huge collection of historic buildings, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. But I believe my favorite street is Lime Street. There's about a block and a half period, or a portion of that you could teach an architecture course out there because there's so many different types of architecture side by side. Even have an Art Deco house here, which is quite interesting. We have agricultural and industrial history here of some of our early industries. Earliest, probably modern industry, in my book, would have been Goodyear, 1927. Now before this, the Northerners that came here built a riverfront. They recognized the riverfront. Boy, you put a lot of industries out there. They did. We had a pretty large cadre of industries, dozens of pretty good sized industries out there in the 1880s. So we have been an industrial giant in this state for almost 150 years. So the industries that we had, this wasn't just an accident. They are the successors to previous industries, a lot of which produce the same kind of thing, But now what we have today is the more modern and up-to-date version of these. So Goodyear really put us on the map. That was a national company, 1927. We're talking about 100 years ago. We had a modern industry here. By the way, that industry is still producing tire cord. Hyosung, Hyosung, I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce that, but South Korean company that's still producing tire cord out there. Wolverine Tube, Eagles Shipyard, 1937. That put us on the map too. That was a national shipbuilder. They built a lot of the ships that were used in World War II. They built mostly smaller, like Liberty ships, cargo type vessels, like kind of ocean-going barges, that type of a boat. Chemstrand in 1951. 1551 began the trend to what I call the mega industries that we enjoy today. Chemstrand, Wolverine, the ones that came along after that, the 3M, where Phil worked for years and years, Amoco, BP, and then on and on and on. We are still an industrial powerhouse, industrial giant. By the way, 27% of our people work in manufacturing in this city. 27. Now, I know what you think. Well, big deal. Doesn't everybody? No. National average is about 4%. About 4% of the city's workforce, maybe 5%, work in manufacturing. We're a manufacturing juggernaut here. It's who we are, and we'll talk about that a little more depth in just a minute. I saw the other day in one of our local industries, starting pay, they're advertising now. You have to have a skill set to work there. The starting pay, $123,900 in full benefits. That's pretty good money. Now, if you're making that in Los Angeles, where my daughter lives, that's not that big a deal. Cater, Alabama, you live like a king for $130,000 in full benefits. You really can. You know what you're doing. So, agriculture and industry has always been important here. We were a cotton town. I grew up here. I remember when Cater Davies always front page headline, that big first bale of cotton comes in. The first bale of cotton, whoever produced that, they take it to the Chamber of Commerce, which was in the old Hotel Lions building just down the street here on Bank Street. You take it down there, and if you were the first one, you got a $500 prize. Well, big deal. Well, that's $5,000 today. You know, that's a big deal. First 500 pounds of cotton, you got an extra $5,000 for it, which is pretty good money. Civil rights. Most folks don't know about the Scottsboro Boys trials that took place here. They were I was judged for 25 years on the active bench, and then another several years working at the state Supreme Court. My way of thinking, they're probably the most famous civil rights cases of all time. Movies made about it, a Broadway play made about the Scottsboro Boys. Yeah, it's going on right now. Books. Back in the day, newspaper articles, it was covered worldwide. Those trials were. Probably the most famous civil rights case of all time. The first one occurred in Scottsboro because the arrests were made and the crime that was alleged occurred in Jackson County. The result was so biased that the state Supreme Court set aside and said, we made a mistake letting this even happen. There to begin with, moving this to Decatur, we're going to start this all over again. I'm not going to go into all of it because it makes for a very good talk at some point in time, but the end of this several years ago, and Senator Arthur Orr was the one that sponsored the legislation. I think it was unanimous in the state legislature, and the governor signed off as well, granted a full pardon to each of these young men for everything they were accused of. Now, That wasn't a perfect solution because they had long since passed away, all of them. But an exoneration of the record was extremely important. Interesting cases. Early aviation prior field, as soon as it was finished as an airport, it was commandeered, so to speak, by the federal government because, why? World War II had broken out, and they used it for a pilot training facility, and it was used throughout the entire war as a pilot training center. So it was famous for that reason. Early aviation, the nearby Huntsville International Airport, and its intermodal center. Well, why am I talking about that? Well, Decatur has a lot to do with this part of Huntsville's history as well. And in fact, by the way, the airport there started out as the Huntsville-Decatur Airport. Y'all aware of that? There's a Huntsville-Decatur jetplex. And the port there, are you ready for this? The port is the 14th largest port in America. Now, how can that be? It's not even on water. Trucking, trains, international air freight. Huntsville International Airport, there's not an international passenger flight going out of that airport. But there's a lot of international freight coming into there. If they ever build a canal from the Tennessee River, they're talking about doing that, putting it on water as well. That could be one of the top 10 ports in America now. Let me tell you what that means. That puts you in the same league as New York, Philadelphia, Miami, Los Angeles, Long Beach, San Francisco, Seattle. Those are top 10 ports. We could be a top 10 port at some point in time. Real quickly, parks. We have been known for our parks. I would be shot dead if I didn't mention parks. We're part of Parks and Recreation. Our oldest park, Delano Park, 1887. I'm gonna let you in on a little secret most people don't know about. We're about to be an arboretum. An arboretum is a large collection of trees. We think of Delano as, well, that's a nice park with some trees out there. No. We have about 125 different species of trees out there. That's what makes it special. That's what makes the Arboretum is a very special park. That is a place that has an enormous number of different, not just different trees or numbers of trees, but different types of trees. We've got some really unusual trees out there. Port Mallard was perhaps the nation's first wade pool. It, of course, is historic in and of itself. It's a little over 50 years old now. We have about 30 parks, about 50 different facilities of different parks and different facilities of different types. And that is a prime generator of tourism in the city. Sports. The T formation was introduced to Southern football on Benson Field, which is now known as Rhodes Field Park. It was used by Decatur High School in 1941. That was power football. That's old SEC, rock'em, sock'em, 3 yards and a cloud of dust football. Before that, football was more of a finesse game. That actually occurred right here in Decatur. How about this? I know 4 guys that lived in Decatur at one point in time or another that started in the NFL. Let's say Philip Rivers, Rolando McClain, Tavius Biddle, and Gerard Highlands. All grew up in Decatur. 3 of them played at Decatur High. One ended up playing at Athens High. All Decatur residents. I guess actually at the same time. And then started in the NFL at the same time. I didn't put this on my original one, and shame on me. I mean, you just start thinking about things and you get overwhelmed and you just don't think of space. Oh my gosh. Jim Odom, who lives on Cherry Street right now, about 4 blocks from here, was the manager of the Hubble Telescope. Think about that. The guy that put up the, well, come on in, come on in. The guy that put up the fantastic telescope.
Is she back there?
There you go. Guy that put up the, or was in charge of putting up the Hubble telescope, lived here. Mae Jemison, the first black astronaut, grew up in Decatur. Robin Henderson and Jody Sandlin Singer. Robin was the associate director of Marshall Space Flight Center. Jody Singer is the current director. Both of those grew up here or lived here. Space, we got that pretty much down pat. Now, fine arts, take our opera house, interesting, still standing. The Princess Theater was a livery stable in 1887. It's now believed to be the state's oldest continuously operated theater. And of course, Fine Arts Theater at this point in time. Now, I haven't done this before, but we got just a few minutes. So, I want to, I'm just going to give you a list of some of the famous people that have lived here, okay? And maybe a blurb about them. I've already talked about Philip Rivers, Tay Biddle, Rolando McClain, Gerard Powers. Just some of our famous people. I'm going to invite you to jump in and tell me ones, and I've got a pen ready so I can write down some more here. Albert Brewer was governor of this state. Carolyn Courtner Smith, some believe, doing a little more research on this, but some believe she may have been the first female architect in Alabama. We know that she designed about and built about 750 buildings, most of them houses. We know that she designed and rendered the Delano Park sandstone structures. By the way, why do we see a lot of sandstone in our parks? It's an homage to her. It's a throwback to her work. Barrett Shelton Sr. A lot of people say, well, what's the big deal with him? He's a publisher of the newspaper. Well, no. Franklin Delano Roosevelt described him as the father of the Tennessee Valley Authority. Said if it had not been for him trumpeting it and tirelessly telling people in the South what a good thing it would be, it was very unpopular in the South, because it's taking people's land, taking their farmland, their home places, and putting it underwater. But look at what it's done for us today. Mae Jemison, we already talked about her. Robin Henderson, Jody Singer, talked about them. Jim Odo, talked about him. E.O. Wilson. Who was E.O. Wilson? Does anybody know of E.O. Wilson? Isn't that sad? He was considered by many, just passed away. He was considered by many to be the world's greatest living scientist at the time of his death. He was an expert on ants and everything that had to do with ants, which a lot of how ants do things kind of mimic things that we do. So he was quite a famous scientist and entomologist. Don Whitmire, we've already talked about, famous admiral, famous football player. Joe Hooper, the gentleman that did receive a Congressional Medal of Honor and was nominated for a second. Samuel Sinclair Broadus. Bill, give us one sentence on SS Broadus.
His father was Dr. John A. Broadus, who was the founder of the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary.
Broadman Hymnal.
He's the reason we have Horseshoe Bend National Park.
Yep.
He wanted to do something for the 100-year celebration of the Creek-Indian War, and so he petitioned the legislature to do something at Horseshoe Bend, and that's why we got that as a national park.
And how did he earn his living?
He was a banker.
And tell me a little bit about the banking part of it.
Well, he started out working for John D. Rockefeller.
Who? Someone from Decatur worked for Rockefeller. How about, keep going.
Yeah, well, his dad was good friends
Uh-huh.
with Lee Rockefeller and with Andrew Carnegie. In fact, the reason we got the Carnegie Library is because of John A. Broadus' connection with Andrew Carnegie. So whenever they wanted a library here for Decatur, then they asked Samuel Sinclair Broadus to go talk to Andrew Carnegie. But he had the Tennessee Valley Bank, which grew into now the BBVA Compass.
BBVA Compass,
Yeah, so I like to tell people the 25th largest bank in the United States started right here on Bank Street.
It did. Tennessee Valley Bank went all the way through State National, Compass, BBVA Compass.
Central Bank and then Compass.
Central Bank, yeah.
BBVA Compass.
That fellow worked about block down the street. Yeah. J.R. Thompson, Bob Thompson. Anybody remember Bob? Oh, he was head of NASA one point in time. Not here. NASA. His son Skip. You want to know Skip? What Skip just do? Hurry up. What?
Well, I know he's on the TVA board.
He was the chairman of the TVA board. Sure was. That's pretty high cotton. Johnny Cadet, we all think, those of us that knew him just think, man, he's a good guy, a great community leader. Wait a minute, he was the chairman of the board of trustees at the University of Alabama for about 40 years. He was the interim president of the university on several occasions. He wasn't just a community leader, he was a state leader as well. Oh, what about Dean Jones? What did that dude do? Every movie I went to when I was a kid had Dean Jones in it. He was an actor, of course. Lucas Black, some people consider him to be a Decatur guy. Really, he's a Lawrence Countyan, but close enough. And Perry Stevens, I don't really know of Perry Stevens. He was a soap opera star, but I think he did he
He
live around?
graduated Decatur High School in 1976.
Did he?
By the name Moody at that time.
Oh, I know who you're talking about now.
Perry Moody, uh-huh.
Yeah.
I know he was at Opryland for a little while,
Uh-huh.
and then at some point changed his name to Stevens, and was on the soap opera Loving.
Okay.
And has since passed away, and is buried out in Los Angeles.
Okay.
One of the big cemeteries out there.
Another famous guy. Judge Seaborn Lynn, who served as a federal judge for 54 years. Time of his death, he was the longest serving federal judge. Say this blessed. Lady.
Tell him where his house is, Judge.
Who, Judge Lynn's?
Yeah.
Let's see, it's at the corner of, is it?
Right next to the Dyken Park.
Yeah, it's corner Cherry and Ferry. Yeah, neat old house. That place was kind of a political headquarters for my dad, who was also a federal judge. Actually, he was summoned down to, as a lawyer, summoned down to Judge Lynn's house. And Judge Lynn said, Ed, you have just been appointed as federal bankruptcy judge. Just want to be the first to tell you.
He was the longest serving federal judge.
I think he was, unless someone has surpassed that in the last few years since his death. He was the longest serving federal judge of all time. 55 years, you think about it, you have to have a little age on you to get to be a federal judge to begin with, usually. So he was old up there and still sharp mind when he passed away. Lady Grace Hines Curzon. I know Phil would know who she is. Anyone else know who she was? I grew up in the Burleson Hines McIntyre house. Later married the Viceroy of India, who was in my opinion, second most powerful person in the world at that point in time, second only to the King of England. And you're the head basically of Asia, is basically what the vice was, and she was married to it. Grew up here. Okay. Now there's some. Anybody else got any?
May Jemison.
Yeah, May Jemison, we talked about her a little bit, yeah. Anybody else got another one you think? If you think of any, get with me, because I like to hang on to that list and put it out there.
Dr. John Sutherland was
Yes.
President of the Old State Bank and also known as the messenger of the Alamo.
Shame on me. Shame on me. First president of this bank left here. Davy Crockett was a buddy and some others that were in the Alamo expedition. He was part of the Alamo expedition and survived it because his horse reared up and threw him and fell on him inside of the Alamo. So they realized he wasn't mobile enough to fight, strapped him back on his horse, sent him back to get reinforcements because they realized they were outnumbered 20-1. All of his buddies were killed inside the Alamo. The reason he survived the Alamo expedition is that he was getting the reinforcements. So he was, as Bill said, he was the messenger of the Alamo. The message was, help, come quick. And
He reported that to Sam Houston. And more importantly, he came from my hometown.
that is important. Yeah, absolutely. Dr. John Sutherland, shame on me. If you think of any others, let me know. Now, I want to do something that I did for a group of Huntsvillians. They came to the Cook Museum, and I was asked to come talk about Decatur. They wanted to learn about the surrounding areas. And I jumped at that chance because, to be real honest with you, now my wife's from Huntsville. I've got a lot of contacts over there. I like Huntsville. We go to Huntsville often or whatever. But just to be real honest, some maybe in our sister city don't think as highly of us as I think they ought to be honest. Hear that? So I prepared this little thing to kind of tell them who I think we are from my 70 years of experience in living here. So let me just throw out a few things that I think define who we are. Ready? I'm just going to do these in a hurry. We're an old city. We were founded really in 1820, but we were settled by about 1814 and 15. Huntsvillians brag on the fact that they were among the very earliest settlements here, which is very true. That they're a little older than us in that regard. However, we're right in there with them. We're an old city as well. Have a very high quality of life, which in many ways is driven by our Parks and Recreation Department. We are known for our parks here. It's part of, I don't know who came up with Positively Decatur, but God bless them. I love that slogan. I think Positively Decatur. I like that. We have a variety of museums. We have 5 free museums. We have this one, the Old State Bank, Depot, Carnegie Visual Arts Center. We have the Cook Museum, which is an admission charge museum. The County Archives, another free one. And then the Wildlife Refuge Museum, which is undergoing restoration, is another free museum. Okay, I'm gonna make this real quick. We're just about done. We are reclaiming our riverfront. That has been my passion for years. It used to be part of the downtown, guys. It's becoming part of the downtown again, and needs to be. We're a blue-collar town. I'm proud of that. I worked in blue-collar jobs, but I'm a blue-collar thinker. I worked my way through college working at Wolverine and in an ice plant. I know what it means to be a blue-collar worker. I think that way. Don't apologize for it. We're a big industry city. We're volunteer rich. You just think of all the things that people volunteer to do. It's just an amazing thing. We're a small town filled within a large city. That's especially true in our historic districts. It's almost like living in a village. We are slower to change. I kind of like that myself. As a historian, I'm not against moving forward. You've got to move forward. You're either going to move forward or move backward, take your pick. But we need to preserve the things that need to be preserved. We're a divided town. with a mentality of east and west divided by railroad tracks. Really are. We have the most racially diverse education system in the state. Our superintendent is one of 4 in the nation to receive the Blue Ribbon Schools of Excellence Superintendent Award, and 10 of 17 schools in our city are National Blue Ribbon schools. We're history driven. People here love their history. We're slower paced than Huntsville. And can I be honest? That's one reason I'd rather live in Decatur than Huntsville. We just don't get in a hurry. We have a village mentality. It takes a village, really is something that a lot of people take to heart here. We tend to take care of our own people's needs. Yeah, that does tend to happen. A large part of our citizenry are faith-based. We have a lot of churches here. We're fast food lovers. Several years ago, a survey was run, and we were I think the third most, we had the third most fast food consumption per capita of any place in the nation. We have a very stable economy, very low unemployment rate all of the time. By the way, did you realize this? At the time I did this, a month or so ago, we had the lowest unemployment in the nation. Whoa. 1.6% unemployment at that point in time. That's incredible. We're sports minded. We're not a little Huntsville. You want to make Decatur folks mad? Intimate that we are a little brother of Huntsville. No, we're smaller than Huntsville, but we're a great city on our own, and always have been. In fact, I can remember when I was a kid, we were bigger than Huntsville. I can remember those days. All right, a couple of us. City of engineers. Huntsville and Decatur have more engineers per capita than anywhere else in America. Per population, we have more engineers, 7,000 at NASA. You think of how many engineers we have working on the river out here? Thousands of them. We love anything free. We love anything cheap. How many thrift stores do we have here? How many dollar type stores do we have here? We do a lot, and I like them too. I mean, free concerts and festivals, that's our bread and butter right here. By the 2020 census, we are about 60% white, 22% African American, 14% Latino, and 2% Asian. I'm gonna be very honest. I think our Latino population is underreported. I think it's more 18 to 20%. Our poverty rate, is it higher or lower than Huntsville? It's exactly the same. About a 15% poverty rate in both of them. So when you hear, well, Huntsville, man, everybody in Huntsville is richer than everybody in Decatur. No, that isn't quite true. Our average family income here is about $53,000, $54,000. It is higher in Huntsville, about $61,000. Where are we going? And then we'll end with this. We have about 2,000 housing units being constructed or planned at this point in time. Now that will support about 10,000 people. Okay? Those are all types of housing units. Have 2 downtowns. Both of them are flourishing. You know, I have people all the time. I wish our downtowns were like they used to be. Whoa. I remember how they used to be. They were flourishing then. They're flourishing now too. And bigger today than they were. We're a banking center again. Some people don't see the advantage of that. Let me tell you the advantage of that. Banks grow in places that are growing in money and in population. We've had several new banks come in here. We've had several old banks that have expanded their operations here. When I was a kid, we were the banking system or center for North Alabama. We're not going to be that again. That will be Huntsville. But we're going to be right in there with them. We have quite a few new banks here, and that's a good thing. We have a lot of great organizations here. Very strong Chamber of Commerce, strong tourism office, a strong downtown redevelopment authority. Tourism is becoming a big industry here with riverboats, sports things of different types, conventions. We're beginning to draw conventions now. More hotels. That's a good thing. That's always a good thing because that means more tourism to come to the town. I hear a lot of people say, I just don't believe Decatur has many tourists. Have you seen how many new hotels we've had built in the last 5 years? Who stays in hotels? How many of you who live here stay in a hotel? I'm not seeing any hands going up. People, you got kicked out of your house tomorrow. People who stay in hotels are tourists for various reasons. We constantly get new industry here. I had a nice announcement the other day of about 250, 300 new jobs. Within a couple of years, we're going to have 4 high-end hotels on our waterfront. Now think about it. A lot of people indicate we don't think of the waterfront as being a classy place. We think of that as a place to work on, a place to fish on. But it's going to be a classy place. You're going to have a fellow that developed City Harbor in Gunnersville. Is going to have condos, perhaps a hotel over there, Home 2 Suites. Already got the DoubleTree. You're going to have Libby Sims, the very high-end hotel on the river. We're going to have an entrance corridor on Highway 31 that is going to beautify the city, coming in over the bridges. Hopefully we'll have a new bridge here before too long. A lot of new retail and restaurants coming to the city. By the way, new retail in the downtowns. We're beginning to see that again. There's some heartburn and trepidation about parking lots being covered up now by new buildings. Well, that's the way it was in the 50s and 60s. You know, everybody wants to go back to the old times. There were not parking lots in the downtown. You parked on the street. You did. So we're just going back to what we were and having stuff to fill up those places. We're going to have our new huge parks complex, a centralized complex in Wilson Morgan Park. Decatur, which has been a more neighborhood-oriented Parks and Rec department, is going to be a more centralized one, which is the modern way to do things. You're going to have one huge centralized complex and then some smaller ones throughout the city. That is much easier to administer, to manage. It's cheaper as far as maintaining facilities and that type of thing. Our financial coffers are stable and growing. Just one guy's opinion, I think this city has been extremely well managed financially. And the proof is in the pudding on that. Our bond rating is very high for cities, especially cities our size. You know, your bond folks in New York and Washington and other places that rate a city's finances, we're generally very high rated because we have the wherewithal to pay our bills. And the good thing about that, we have money surpluses right now at exactly the right time. Because you want to know how Huntsville grew? Huntsville grew because the city partnered with various private investors to put things in that the city wanted. The city handpicked, we need this and that. We're beginning to do more of that here. Not everybody's a fan of that. I'm a huge fan of that because the private sector has more money, and that ain't tax money. So, help it out a little bit with the infrastructure, and get nice goodies for things. So that's a little bit about who we have been, who we are, and hopefully a little bit of where we're going. Okay? I know we're about 5 minutes over time, and I apologize for that, but anybody who's awake want to make a comment? Anything anybody wants to jump in on? All right. I've either told you everything you wanted to know, or you're just so zonked out you can't even think. Well, this has been a lot of fun. I really encourage you to come to all these and invite others to come as well. It's a great thing to know about our city. After going through this hundreds of times over the last 10 years, I decided, well, we're going to have a little fun at one of our concerts, and I said, we've got a free gift if you can answer this easy question. What was the first name of Decatur? And someone proudly shouted out, Albany. No. Albany came by about 100 years later. So, it's nice when folks know about their history. We've got a great history, and it's a lot of fun to learn about things. I'm going to be honest with you, I'm going to make every effort to go to every one of these concerts, every one of these lectures, because they're just wonderful. First Baptist, don't miss that one. Just going to go through these real quickly. In case you came in just a tad late. First Baptist is mostly looking at the architecture and learning a little about the history of the old sanctuary, 1908 sanctuary. Guys, it is drop dead gorgeous. If you love churches in Europe, you're going to like this. It's pretty special. Native Americans, that one, by the way, is on September the 1st. October the 13th, now that is the only one, Phil, I think that is not on the first Friday. Phil had a conflict on the first Friday, but we really wanted him to speak. So he's going to be on the second Friday, which is October the 13th. Native Americans in North Alabama, don't miss that. If you missed Dr. Caroline Swope, I'm sorry. I basically went to the city council and said, if you don't hire this lady, I'm done too. I'm serious. Pretty much what I said. She is such a talent. Caroline, how many people do you know of that have a doctorate in a historic preservation field?
Don't know. Don't keep count.
Well, I have tried to count the ones in this state, and I know of one.
Yeah, in this state, no.
I know of one in this state. We're just awfully fortunate to have her. By the way, she taught at University of Washington for what, 20 years, right at?
I was there about 10.
10, okay. Just about
Trying to make me older than I
Well, you started when you were 16. There you go. If you missed Miss Kate Lackner, you have missed the essence of Decatur. Pond Spring, we've got John Griffin, who is the executive director of Pond Spring, Joe Wheeler's home, to come here to talk to us. I did one on Pond Spring and its owner, and he's going to return the favor and come talk about the Sherrod family, who has a lot to do with this bank, as well as Joe Wheeler himself. Then the African American Movers and Shakers, that is going to be, I plan to gain a lot of knowledge myself at that one. I know of a fair number of the folks that are African American that were leaders in this town. By the way, the first hospital in this town was not the Benevolent Society, now known as Decatur General or Decatur Morton. It was a cottage home infirmary, which Dr. Sturgis, an African American gentleman, started about 20 years before of Benevolent Society Hospital. So there you go. And then antiques and treasures. If you like antiques, that's your cup of tea. There are a lot of different kinds of history in my book, and that's one that we don't talk about, and we should. But from my point of view, just because people love it. I love it. Why do you love it? So don't miss any of these. Food trucks out there?
No, it is raining, so everybody has abandoned us.
They've abandoned ship. I'm sorry, you gotta go home and eat your own tuna fish. There you go.
If anybody wants to sign up for any of these, I'm the one that's on the phone on the flyer. If you just want to go ahead and sign up while you're here, just let me know before you leave.
Thanks for a nice crowd. This is a good crowd to get started with, and tell others.
Thank you.
Thank y'all. Thank y'all for coming. Well, thank y'all for coming. Thank you. Appreciate y'all being here. If y'all come to these next ones, I plan to attend.